we're looking at scientific management and we are looking at managing our operations. We've been referring to a class activity where we're building gingerbread houses. So in our previous videos, we talked about identifying inputs and outputs, looking at the value added. So what is it we are doing for the customer that they can't do themselves, and identifying the types of transformations. So if we think about what were those types of transformations, right? We had physical, so we can manufacture things. We had locational, so we move something we didn't make or sell. We have exchange, so that's retail, where we are making it available where the customers are. We have psychological, okay, changing the mind. Physiological, changing the being. And we had informational in terms of providing communication and information. So as we look at our gingerbread house, we are going from our inputs. That is, we have the crackers or cookies. We have our candy. Those are all our inputs. We have our workers. That's part of our inputs. And our output, of course, is the gingerbread house. The value added, we are, of course, of making it so that the customer doesn't have to make it themselves. We're saving them time. And so the idea, what type of transformation do we have here? Which one is it? Well, we have a physical transformation because we are making the gingerbread house. In our previous video, we talked about creating process flow diagrams so we could set out the steps in terms of making the gingerbread house. We're going to need to assemble some walls. We're going to need to add decorations. And of course, we need to include the decisions that we're making in terms of, do we have enough glue or icing sugar? Do we have enough decorations? Is that holding so we can move on to the next part of the assembly? So our process flow diagram outlines all of those components. We, of course, start with a circle. The activities here are in squares. Any decisions are going to be our diamonds. If we need input from other people, we have a parallelogram. And we, of course, will end with a circle. So we're outlining the steps in terms of creating our gingerbread houses. And then we are flagging the activities that can be done at the same time if we had more than one worker. So we then now want to actually produce the gingerbread house. So according to scientific management, we should make it, and then we should look at how long it takes, and we should look at the costs that come with it. Because remember, if we're using Taylor's scientific management approach, we are looking for the one best way. So what is the most productive, so we can make the most in the least amount of time, and what is the most efficient, so what can we do that makes the most for the least? So we need to look at our costs. As we look at production, so as we actually do it, we need to measure what we call productivity. So there are different measures of productivity. We have a total productivity measure, a multifactor measure, and a partial measure. So what we're looking at is, are we getting any bang for our buck? Is there any value added? So the total measure of productivity takes the total value of the output and divides by the total value of the input. So if, for example, we had a $10 gingerbread house and it cost us $5 in terms of materials and labor, then our total productivity measure, 10 divided by 5, is 2. Now, the important part when it comes to productivity measures is how you measure it. So because we have inputs here of materials, so our crackers, our cookies, and our candy, and our people, we just can't add one person plus one gumdrop. We have to turn it all into dollar value so we can combine it to look at its value. So we're looking at, with our total measure of productivity, a dollar value of output. So what's the value we're making versus what's the cost to make it. So here, if it's a $10 house and $5 worth of materials and labor, then we are getting $2 of output for every $1 of input. The idea here is the value what you make should be more than the cost to make it. We want to increase the value. We want to add value. So we want that number to be more than 1 because we're getting $2 worth of output for every dollar of input. We're basically doubling the value by making the gingerbread house. So that's a total measure of productivity. A partial measure of productivity just takes a single input. So we could look at labor productivity. So what are we producing in terms of the value of the gingerbread house versus the cost of the worker? So dollar of gingerbread house created per dollar of labor. Okay. Now you can measure productivity in different ways. We could look at number of gingerbread houses per number of worker hours or worker minutes. So it doesn't have to be dollar for dollar, but the benefit of looking at it in terms of dollars of output versus dollars of input is we want it to be more money in terms of value added. So we want more dollars of output versus more dollars of input. When you do it in terms of one gingerbread house for, so let's say we can make, say when it comes to our gingerbread houses, we can make, so let's see. So if we have, let's say we can make 10 houses, okay, and that takes 2 labor minutes. Okay, so we end up with 5 houses per labor minute. We are fast. Okay, then is that good or bad? Well, we need something to compare it to. So then you have to compare to previous production methods in terms of, are you able to make more houses per labor minute? Okay, so the benefit of the dollar one is that you can see by it alone if we're adding value. If you're using other methods that aren't dollar on top and dollar on bottom, you're going to need some comparator. We can look at partial productivity measures in terms of labor, in terms of machines, in terms of our raw materials. So partial productivity measures, the key here is there's just one type of input, people, candy decorations, right? So we've been specified there. Multi-factor measures of productivity, the only difference is instead of one input, it's more than one input. So a multi-factor measure of productivity could combine labor and materials together. Then, because we are combining two things that are very different, it has to be in terms of dollar value of input. If you want more information about calculating productivity, there's a link to a video here from the operations management class where they dive deeper into productivity. But for this class, the focus really is on, how much bang for our buck are we getting? So for our gingerbread, let's calculate the labor productivity, and we'll look at it in terms of units of output, so number of gingerbread houses per labor minute. And we'll look at labor productivity in terms of value of output, so the dollar value of the gingerbread house per value of labor, so bang for our buck. And then we'll also calculate material productivity. So we'll take all of the raw materials that we're using and look at it in terms of the value of the gingerbread house versus the value of the materials. All right, so let's assume that my production is not very elaborate. So here we have pictures from our class production. And you can see some houses are a lot more elaborate, some are more simple, and that means we can produce a lot more in a limited time. For this activity, we're going to assume that your gingerbread house can be valued in terms of sale price at $3 if it's very basic, $5 for medium, and $10 if it's very elaborate. In our construction, our limitation here is that our little Lego person has to be able to fit in and out of your gingerbread house. So that's your constraint. We also need some costs, so we need to know how much it costs to make our gingerbread house. So let's assume that we're going to pay our people 33 cents per minute. That comes out to about minimum wage per hour. And then we have candy that's made up of jelly beans, berries, and jujubes. And each one of these is 1 cent per piece. So you can see in terms of our decorations here, we're looking at 1 cent for each one of of these types of items here. Okay. We also have little packs of candy, our little Smarties. That's what you see here. And because they come in rolls, then the cost for the Rockets or Smarties, so in the US, they're called Smarties. In Canada, they're called Rockets, probably because in Canada, Smarties are already taken by some M&M type candy. All right, so our candy Rockets are 5 cents a sleeve. And then we have our crackers or cookies, and they are 10 cents per cracker. If you buy a box of these, then these gingerbread or what are they called? Graham crackers. That's what they are. So if you get a whole box of graham crackers, that's like 27 crackers in total. So here we have our costs. Here we have our price that we can sell our gingerbread house for. We have decided on our production process. So we created that process flow. And now we need to actually make the gingerbread house. Okay, so whatever your design, you're now going to make that house. And as we do that, we want to track the cost. So what is the cost of labor? So number of workers times minutes times 33 cents. What is our candy cost? So we are going to multiply the individual candies by 1 cent, the Rockets, the little candies that come in a pack, by 5 cents, and of course the cracker costs by 10 cents. We must include all materials that we use, even if they're not in the final product. So anything we eat, anything that gets thrown away, is a cost to the organization. We had to get it to start with, and so we make sure we include it. So let's assume that I make a very crude gingerbread house. It essentially is 2 crackers and a little decoration on the top. Maybe we add a 3rd cracker just to create kind of a little 2 walls and a roof. Okay, it's a teepee-ish type thing. And I'm going to put 1 little decoration on it, so 1 juju. It took me 2 minutes. It's me by myself. So because it's a very basic gingerbread house, it's not fancy, it costs $3 in terms of the price I can sell it for to the customers. How much does it actually cost to make it? Well, I'm 1 worker for 2 minutes at 33 cents. So the cost of the worker is 66 cents. The 1 candy decoration is 1 cent, and my 3 crackers cost me a total of 30 cents. So my total cost here is 97 cents. How productive am I at making these gingerbread houses? And is my method the one best way? Maybe your method is the one best way. All right, so we need to do some calculations here. So we could calculate labor productivity, units of output per labor minute. So I made 1 gingerbread house. It took me, 1 person, 2 minutes. So I am able to make half of a gingerbread house per labor minute. Is that good? Is that bad? Well, that depends on the other methods of production and if they're able to get more gingerbread houses per labor minute. Okay. We can also look at the value of our output per value of labor. So I made a $3 gingerbread house. And my labor, remember it's 1 person working for 2 minutes at 33 cents a minute. My output is $4.55 worth of gingerbread houses per dollar of labor. And I think when we did the production in class, I'll just scroll back here to our team here. And they beat me in the production process. So they had a simpler design in terms of the house. Mine took a while because I had to hold the walls together that kept falling down. This design is a bit more stable here. And so they were able to produce, I think there's a total of like 18 houses here. And they were able to get those out much quicker. And so if you look at their numbers then in terms of their labor productivity, they're able to produce more than a half a gingerbread house per labor minute. Okay, so they're more productive than me. Their method might be the one best way. Now, we can also look at labor productivity in terms of value of output per value of labor, right? So I created $4.50 worth of gingerbread houses for every dollar put into labor. We can also look at our productivity in terms of material material productivity. So here we are looking at all of the materials we use. So we had crackers, we had a jujube, and so we combine those together in terms of the 30 cents we had for the 3 crackers and the 1 jujube. So all of our raw materials together. And because we're combining crackers and jujubes, then we have to look at it in terms of value. 1 cracker is not equal to 1 piece of candy. And so we're looking here at bang for our buck. And so here we're getting almost $10 worth of gingerbread houses for $1 of material. Why? Because it's very basic. There was like no decorations on it. And so we are very productive when it comes to our material use because we're really not using a lot of materials. If we look at much more elaborate houses, and we had some pretty elaborate houses, the more candy decorations, of course, that you have, the lower the material productivity because we're going to have to spend more on all of that candy per house. Is that good or bad? Well, ultimately, we're going to look at in terms of the value created. So if it's a very basic house, then we're only selling it for $3. If it's a more elaborate house that we're selling for $10, then because we are getting more value of output, we can afford more cost of input and still maintain that level of productivity. So decisions you make when you produce is when we look at these productivity measures, how much value am I creating? So what is the value of the output? What is the value of the input? Later on, we'll talk about quality. And of course, we'll talk about in terms of pricing structures. And so in all of those cases, can you sell it for a higher price? Do people prefer the higher quality? Those type of decisions come into the manager to help make those decisions. And so there is some trade-off because if my focus is solely on productivity, then I want lots of very basic gingerbread houses because I can crank them out fast and they don't cost me a lot of money to do so. So as we look at decisions that managers make, we both have to look at the best way to make something. But later on, we're also going to be looking at what's the price I can sell it for, what kind of quality do my customers want, and so on. So all of these are part of decisions that we're making as we manage the business. We can look finally here at total productivity measures. So we can combine the materials, combine the labor. So we've added up the total cost here to make that gingerbread house. If we can sell it for $3 and the cost to make it is 97 cents, then essentially we are getting $3.09 worth of gingerbread houses for every dollar of input. So when we're looking at our total productivity measure, we need this to be more than 1. We need to have more bang for our buck, more value created than the cost to make it. And so we could look then at other methods, other gingerbread houses that you created. Are you able to get more bang for your buck? Is your total productivity higher than what I have here?